The vampire king comes across a brutally beaten, paralyzed woman and realizes who she is. The vampire king rode alone through the burned lands beyond his kingdom. The moon hung low, red and thin, like an old wound in the sky. Ash covered the ground where a village once stood. Stone homes had fallen into themselves. Broken towers leaned like tired giants. No voices lived here anymore. This place had died long ago. The king reined in his black horse and looked across the ruins. He felt nothing at first, no sorrow, no regret. He had walked through countless dead lands in his long, endless life. Yet tonight something pulled at him. A quiet pressure in his chest, a strange ache he had not felt in centuries. He closed his eyes, then he felt it, a heartbeat, not his own. The vampire king opened his eyes sharply and turned his horse toward the far edge of the ruins. His senses were sharper than any mortal's. He could hear the shift of ash, the crack of broken stone, the faintest sound of breath. Someone was alive. That alone was impossible. No one had lived here for years. He dismounted and moved forward, his long cloak brushing the ground. Shadows bent toward him as if they knew their master. He stepped over fallen beams and cracked marble until he saw her. She lay half buried beneath stone and ash. At first he thought she was already gone. Her body was still. Her clothes were torn and covered in dust. One arm lay twisted at her side. Her legs did not move at all. But then her chest rose slowly, weakly. She was alive. The vampire king knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. He had ruled through fear, commanded armies, destroyed cities. He was not known for mercy. Yet something about her stopped him. Her face was pale, marked with pain and exhaustion, but not fear. Her eyes were open, dark, aware. They were watching him. Most people screamed when they saw him. Some begged, some fainted, some tried to run. She did none of those things. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She could not speak. The king reached out slowly, careful even though he did not need to be. The moment his fingers brushed her wrist, a sharp burn rushed up his arm. He pulled back with a hiss. Ancient symbols flared across his skin, glowing red, then silver. His curse, his crown's magic reacted violently. That had never happened before. His heart, long frozen and distant, stuttered. "No," he whispered, the word tearing from his throat before he could stop it. He looked at her again, truly looked this time, at the shape of her face, the curve of her brow, the quiet strength in her gaze. Even now, memory struck like lightning. A moonlit throne room, silver banners, a woman standing before him unafraid, dead. She was dead. He had watched it happen. The vampire king shook his head slowly. "Impossible," he said aloud, though no one else was there to hear him. The woman blinked once slowly, as if the movement cost her everything. Her fingers twitched, barely, but they moved. And they reached not far, not strong, but enough to touch the edge of his cloak. The contact sent a deep, painful warmth through his chest. The king froze. No living soul had touched him like that in centuries. Her hand fell back weak, and her eyes began to close. She was slipping away. He did not think. He lifted her carefully as if she were made of glass. She was lighter than she should have been, too still. Her legs hung uselessly, unmoving, paralyzed. His jaw tightened. Someone had done this to her. He wrapped his cloak around her to shield her from the cold night air. As he did, her breath brushed faintly against his chest, warm, human, real. The vampire king mounted his horse again, holding her close. Shadows moved with them as they left the ruins, swallowing the dead village behind. Above them, the moon darkened. Far away in the heart of the vampire kingdom, bells began to ring, slow, uneasy chimes that had not sounded in 100 years. The castle sensed her. She drifted in and out of awareness as the world moved beneath her. The rhythm of the horse, the steady strength holding her upright, the cold night air on her skin. She did not know where she was. She did not know who he was. But she knew this. She should be afraid. And yet she was not. In her broken mind, memories came in fragments. Fire, stone, a voice shouting her name, pain like falling forever. Then darkness. She stirred slightly, her head resting against something solid, strong, alive. Her lashes fluttered. The Vampire King felt it immediately. He looked down at her face, tense, waiting. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first. Then they found him. Recognition flickered there. Not memory, something deeper, fate. He swallowed hard. "Stay awake," he said quietly, his voice low and rough, unused to gentleness. "Do not sleep yet." Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She tried to move her legs. Nothing happened. Tears filled her eyes. The Vampire King felt something twist painfully inside him. He adjusted his hold more carefully now. "You are safe," he said, though he did not know if it was true. "I will not let you fall." The words felt like a vow, one he had never planned to make. The castle rose from the mountains like a dark crown. Towers of black stone reached toward the sky. Torches flared to life as the gates opened without a command. The guards stiffened when they saw who the king carried. A living woman, a human, in his arms. "Say nothing," the king ordered, his voice sharp once more. No one dared question him. He carried her through long halls lined with ancient banners and into a chamber that had been sealed for generations. Silver markings glowed faintly along the walls. Moon symbols rested above the bed. He laid her down gently. The moment her body touched the sheets, the silver symbols flared bright. The king stepped back, breath tight. There was no more doubt. Only one soul in history had ever awakened this room. He looked at her as she lay there, weak but breathing, eyes slowly closing from exhaustion. "The moonbound queen," he whispered. The title tasted like ash and sorrow. She had loved mercy, balance, light within darkness, and he had destroyed her. Outside the chamber, thunder rolled across the mountains, though the sky was clear. The blood moon began to rise. The Vampire King turned away from the bed, his hands clenched into fists. If the world learned she lived, war would follow. If she remembered who he was, hatred would follow. And if the old prophecy was true, he did not finish the thought. Behind him, the woman's fingers curled weakly against the silver sheets. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, ancient magic stirred awake. In the Vampire Kingdom, dawn was only a change in the color of shadows. The sky outside the castle turned from black to deep gray, and the torches along the walls burned lower, as if even fire respected the silence. The woman slept. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Silver light moved slowly across the walls of the chamber, responding to her presence. The ancient room, sealed for generations, had awakened the moment she arrived. The Vampire King stood near the far wall, watching. He had not left since bringing her here. Servants had come and gone in silence. Healers had bowed low, trembling, afraid to look directly at him or at her. They tried herbs, old magic, careful words. Nothing changed. "She lives," one healer finally said, voice shaking. "But the damage to her body is bound by something older than injury, a curse." The king already knew. "Leave us," he ordered. Now the room was quiet again. He stepped closer to the bed. Her face looked softer in sleep, younger than the memories that haunted him. Long dark hair spread across the silver pillow. Her hands rested at her sides, still, fragile. Her legs did not move. His jaw tightened. He remembered her standing once, tall and calm, before a crowd of kings. He remembered how she had walked through moonlight like she belonged to it, and now her lashes fluttered. The Vampire King froze. Slowly, her eyes opened. She looked around in confusion, then fear crept into her expression as she noticed the unfamiliar sailing, the glowing symbols, the shadows that moved too smoothly. Her gaze landed on him. Her breath caught. "You are safe," he said before she could panic. His voice was low, careful, not the command that shook kingdoms. She swallowed. Her lips moved. No sound came. She tried again, panic rising in her eyes. Her hands clenched the sheets. Then she tried to move her legs. Nothing happened. Her face fell. Tears filled her eyes, silent and heavy. The Vampire King felt something deep in his chest crack. "Do not force yourself," he said quickly. You are injured, rest. She shook her head weakly. Her hands lifted, trembling, and she pointed at her legs. Then she looked at him, eyes wide with fear and questions. He understood. They do not move, he said honestly, but you are alive. That did not comfort her. She turned her face away, silent tears sliding into her hair. The king stood helpless. He had faced armies without fear. He had ended wars with a word. Yet now, before one broken woman, he had no power. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, she looked back at him, eyes searching his face. She raised one hand and slowly moved her fingers, forming letters in the air. W-H-O, he understood again. Who am I? He said quietly. She nodded. For a long moment he did not answer. I am the king of this land, he said at last. You are in my castle. Her eyes widened. Fear returned, sharper this time. She tried to push herself backward but failed. Her arms were too weak. Panic rose in her chest. Do not be afraid, he said firmly, stepping closer. I will not harm you. She studied him as if trying to see past his words. Slowly her breathing eased. She lifted her hand again and wrote another word. W-H-O-M-I. The question struck him harder than any blade. He did not know how to answer. You were found in the ruins, he said carefully. You were hurt. Your memories may return in time. She frowned slightly, thinking. Then she shook her head, confused. Nothing came back, only pain. And darkness. She closed her eyes. The king watched her struggle silently. Someone had taken everything from her, her strength, her voice, her past, and they had left her to fade away. He would not allow that. Days passed. The woman remained in the silver chamber. She learned the rhythm of the castle, the quiet footsteps, the distant echoes, the change in shadows that marked time. The king came every day. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he sat in silence. She learned his presence before she saw him. The air seemed to shift when he entered, heavier but strangely steady. He brought her food, fed her himself when her hands shook too much. He adjusted her pillows. He carried her when she needed to be moved, careful, respectful. She watched him closely. This was not the monster of stories, yet she sensed darkness in him, a deep sorrow, a weight he never set down. One evening, as silver light filled the room, she lifted her hand again. Why me? The king read the words and felt the truth press against his chest. I do not know, he said. That was a lie. He knew exactly why, but he could not tell her, not yet. Another day she asked another question. Why do you look sad? He turned away. Rest, he said instead. She did not press him, but she remembered. At night when she slept, the king walked the halls alone. Whispers followed him. The moonbound signs have returned. A human weakens the throne. She must not live. In the lower levels of the castle, ancient stone cracked. Old magic stirred. A prophecy sealed long ago began to awaken. Blood appeared like ink on stone. The woman dreamed. She stood in a place of light. Moonlight covered everything. She felt strong, whole. Then fire came. A voice called her name. She woke with a gasp. Her hands trembled. Her chest hurt. The king was at her side in an instant. It was a dream, he said, gripping the edge of the bed tightly. You are here. She looked at him, shaken. Slowly she lifted her hand and pressed it against her chest. I was someone. Yes, he said softly. Her eyes searched his. Were we friends? The question cut deep. He closed his eyes. Yes, he answered. It was not the full truth, but it was not a lie. The next morning the healers returned. The curse binds her spine and voice, they said. It reacts to her soul, not her body. Can it be broken? The king asked. The eldest healer hesitated. Yes, but only by the one who placed it. Silence filled the room. The king's hands clenched. He dismissed them without another word. That night he stood alone on the highest tower, staring at the dark horizon. He knew who had cursed her, and what it would mean to undo it. Behind him, far below, the woman struggled in her sleep, caught between past and present. Her fingers curled. Her soul remembered. The castle was no longer quiet. Something had changed. The vampire king felt it in the stone beneath his feet, in the air that moved too slowly through the halls. Ancient magic, older than the throne itself, was waking up, and it was waking up because of her. The woman sat by the tall window in the silver chamber, supported by cushions. Moonlight spilled across her face, soft but sharp at the same time. Her legs lay still beneath the blanket, unmoving, but her hands were steady now. Stronger. Her eyes followed the moon as if it was calling her. The king watched from a distance. For days he had seen small changes. Her focus was sharper, her questions deeper. Sometimes she stared at him as if she almost recognized something but could not yet name it. Memory was coming back, slowly, painfully. She lifted her hand and wrote in the air again, "I see things." He stepped closer. "What things?" She closed her eyes, concentrating, then wrote again. "Fire, crowds, a crown falling." His breath caught. She continued, her fingers shaking. "You standing above me." Silence filled the room. The king felt the weight of centuries press down on him. "What do you feel?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Sadness and betrayal." The words struck like a blade. He turned away. "I do not remember your face clearly," she continued, "but my heart knows something is wrong." She looked at him directly. "You are part of it." He did not deny it. That night she dreamed again, but this dream was not broken. She stood in a great hall filled with silver banners and soft light. Kings and queens watched in silence. She felt calm, strong, whole. Then the hall changed. Shadows grew, voices shouted, fear spread. She saw herself kneeling. She saw him, younger, colder, wearing a crown that burned with dark power. She reached for him. He turned away. The dream shattered. She woke with tears on her face. The king was already there. "I remember," she whispered. It was the first sound her voice had made, soft, broken, real. His head snapped up. She touched her throat, shocked. Then she tried again. "I remember dying." The room seemed to tilt. He dropped to one knee beside her bed, his head bowed. "I am sorry," he said. The words came out raw, stripped of all power. "I was wrong." Her breathing shook. "You chose power," she said quietly, "over mercy." "Yes. And my body," she continued, her voice steady but filled with pain. "Someone bound it. Someone feared my return." He closed his eyes. "I gave the order," he said. "I thought if your soul returned, the world would fall into chaos." She looked at him for a long time. "And did it?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, I did." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she did not look away. "You broke the world," she said, "and yourself." He nodded. "I deserve whatever judgment you give," he said, "but I will not let them harm you again." A bitter smile touched her lips. "They already are." The vampire court was restless. Whispers turned into open fear. "She weakens him. The prophecy is waking. If she lives, the throne will fall." Plots formed in dark corners. Shadows gathered allies. One night the castle alarms rang. The king moved faster than sound. Assassins broke into the silver chamber, weapons ready, faces hidden. They never reached her. The king stood between them and the bed, eyes burning with rage. "Leave," he commanded. They did not. Magic exploded through the room like a storm of shadows. The attackers fell, unconscious, scattered across the floor. The woman watched, heart pounding. Power like that should have terrified her. Instead, it saddened her. "This is what you became," she said softly. He looked at his hands. "Yes." After that night, the truth could no longer be hidden. The king brought her to the upper halls, carrying her in his arms before the court. Gasps filled the chamber. "She lives." The moonbound queen. Impossible. The woman looked small among the towering figures, but her eyes were steady. "Enough," the king said. "She is under my protection." A noble stepped forward. "The prophecy says her survival ends your reign." The king did not flinch. "Then let it end," he said. The hall fell silent. The woman turned to him sharply. "What did you just say?" He met her gaze. "I will not rule a world built on your suffering." Her heart trembled. That night alone together she confronted him. "If you undo the curse," she said, "what will it cost?" "Everything," he answered. "His crown, his power, his immortality." She reached for his hand. "Then I will not allow it," she said. He shook his head. "You do not understand." She tried to move. Her legs did not respond. Frustration and anger surged through her. "Then watch," she said. She pushed herself up. Pain exploded through her body. The curse reacted violently, burning like chains of ice and fire. She cried out, collapsing forward. The king caught her, holding her tightly. "Do not," he begged. "Please." She clutched his cloak. "I will not remain broken," she said through tears. "Not again." The room shook. Deep beneath the castle, the prophecy finished writing itself. The final words burned into stone. Only the fall of the king can make the queen whole. The king read the words and closed his eyes. The choice was clear. And it would destroy him. The sky outside had turned blood red, as though the world itself knew something was coming. Winds howled through the towers, carrying the scent of old magic, smoke, and iron. The vampire king stood in the center of the throne room, the moonbound queen at his side. She still could not walk, but her eyes blazed with determination. He looked at her, silent for a moment. His black cloak moved in the shadows like a living thing. The throne behind him, dark, carved from obsidian, loomed empty and heavy. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low, careful. She nodded. Her fingers clenched the edges of her chair. "I am, but tell me what must happen." He stepped closer. "The prophecy is clear. Only by breaking my crown, my power, can your curse be lifted. You will rise. You will be whole, but I will fall, mortal, weak, vulnerable." She stared at him. For the first time, fear touched her eyes, not for herself, but for him. "No, I cannot let you." He shook his head. "It is the only way. I caused your pain. I cursed your body. I chose power over love. Now only by undoing the world I built can you live free." A silence fell between them, heavy, filled with the weight of centuries. The castle guards, loyal and fearful, had gathered. They knelt at the edges of the hall. The courtiers whispered, tense with anticipation. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Magic crackled in the air, invisible but tangible. The king raised his hands. Shadows flowed along his arms like liquid night. The queen watched, eyes wide. He began the ritual. Dark symbols appeared in the air, glowing red and silver. His voice, deep and resonant, spoke words older than time itself. The crown above him shimmered with power, as if it understood its fate. The woman reached forward instinctively, trembling. "It hurts, doesn't it?" she whispered. He shook his head slightly. "No, I have lived with this for centuries. I feel only what I must to protect you." Tears formed in her eyes. She had lived so long in brokenness, so long in shadows. And now, for the first time, someone stood beside her, willing to give everything for her. The ritual intensified. The symbols spun faster, light burning through stone, fire and shadow fighting for dominance. Her body reacted first. Her legs, once still and lifeless, began to tingle. A faint warmth spread from her spine to her feet. She gasped. "It's working," she whispered. The king's eyes glowed brighter. Shadows twisted around him, pulling at his very being. The crown above him cracked. Tiny fractures formed across the black stone, glowing with fiery veins. "You must let it break," the king said. His voice was strained. "Or it will destroy us both." I can't," she said, panic rising, tears streaming down her face. "You must," he replied, placing a hand over hers. "Trust me." She looked at his face. For the first time she saw the truth there, not the monster of legend, not the king of fear, but a man who had carried guilt longer than any lifetime. A man who loved her quietly, painfully, beyond all power. She nodded. Slowly, carefully, she pushed her fear aside. She let the ritual continue. The crown shattered. A shockwave of magic tore through the throne room. Shadows screamed and fled into the walls. The king collapsed to his knees, pain etched across his immortal face. His powers drained, leaving him human, fragile. The woman felt a sudden surge of strength. The chains around her spine, invisible but crushing, broke. A warmth flowed through her legs. She tested them, and finally she stood. The room fell silent. Guards and courtiers gasped. She walked slowly at first, then with confidence. She turned to him. He looked at her, pale and trembling. Mortality had taken him, but he smiled faintly. Relief and sorrow mixed in his eyes. "You are free," he whispered. She approached him. "No, we are both free now." He tried to rise, but his strength was gone. She reached out and caught him. For a moment they stood together, fragile and human, yet somehow stronger than any magic could make them. Outside the castle, dawn broke for the first time in centuries. The blood-red sky faded into pale gold, light spilling over mountains and forests. The kingdom watched, uncertain, waiting to see what would happen to the king who gave up everything and the queen who returned from the dead. Inside, she helped him to the window. They looked at the world together. "You saved me," she said softly. "No," he replied. "You saved yourself. I only gave you the chance," she smiled. It was small, quiet, but full of power, full of life. For the first time, he did not feel immortal. He did not feel fear. He felt hope, and that was stronger than any curse. Weeks passed. The kingdom adjusted to new rulers. The queen, once broken, now walked through halls of her castle, slowly but surely reclaiming the throne. The king, human and weak, learned the rhythms of life without shadows or magic. They were an unusual pair. A woman of power and grace, a man of humility and sorrow. Together, they began to heal not only themselves but the land around them. She often looked at him, remembering the centuries of darkness they had survived. And he looked at her, finally free of guilt, finally able to love without fear. One evening they stood on the balcony together. Moonlight bathed them in silver. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Never, not for a single moment." She smiled faintly. "Then we will live differently, together." He took her hand, strong, steady, human, their fingers entwined. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not with destruction but with redemption. Far below in the ancient crypts, the symbols that had once bound her faded. Magic remained, but it no longer held her. The throne still stood, dark and empty, but its power was no longer dangerous. For the first time in centuries, the castle was quiet, real quiet, but inside hearts beat faster, souls breathed deeply. And a love that had survived time, war, and darkness began anew. Final cliffhanger ending. As the first morning sun touched the towers, she turned to him and whispered. The world outside had changed, the kingdom had changed, and they had changed too forever. The vampire king was no longer a king of shadows, and the moonbound queen was no longer broken. They were free, whole, and the story of their love had only just begun.